So, finally, welcome to Liberal Viewer Live Wednesday. Liberal Viewer Wednesday Live. I don't know why I had such trouble getting everything started today, but hopefully you'll come join me here. Got some comments. Hello, this live event will begin in a few moments. Okay, you can all see me, you can all hear me, right? Let me just refresh the comments, make sure it's finally working this time. I think I've got everything working. Okay, so I did get some tweets on Twitter, at LiberalViewer, and also on Facebook.com/LiberalViewer. I picked out a couple to start the show with before I answer the live questions. Let me see. The first one I got here was from Emil Frederick Holm. Asked, just a question for next week's Wednesday question session. What's your thoughts on your foreign audience considering Fox News is an American channel covering mostly American news? Really enjoy your videos. Looking forward to the next one. Well, thank you, Emil. Let me go back to the camera. And, I look at my demographics through the YouTube Insights or whatever they're calling it now, and I notice about 40% of my viewers are not in the United States. Most of those foreign viewers are in English-speaking countries like Canada and the UK and Australia, but there are several non-English-speaking countries where I have quite a following. Considering that I'm not speaking their language, Norway and the Netherlands and Germany. I seem to have quite a few viewers in those countries, and I'm kind of proud of that. Now, I know I often get comments on my Fox News videos from people who aren't from the United States, and they say things like, this shows how stupid Americans are, and they see Fox News as representative of America, and that worries me a little bit because even though Fox News is number one in cable news, that means they have maybe 2 or 3 million viewers on their most popular shows out of a country of 350, whatever it is, million in the United States these days. So I worry somewhat when I make these videos that are popular overseas, that people are going to get the impression that Fox News is America, and Fox News only represents a small, somewhat embarrassing segment of America. So I hope my foreign viewers understand that, and that since I'm also an American making the videos criticizing Fox News, that they see that there are those Americans who can see the folly of all of that. So that was, the question from Emil, and before I go to the other question I got over the week, let me switch back to the camera here. Let's see. Before I go to the other question I got during the week here, let me check out my comments here. I know he's going to get this question. What do you, Psycho18C asks, what do you think of the newly elected Pope Francis I? Well, I've been watching a lot of news coverage of the whole new Pope thing, and I wasn't really surprised to see that Fox News was pretty breathless. There are a lot of Catholics work at Fox News, and of course, they're a very pro-traditional values network, and so they had pretty much fawning coverage of the whole Pope selection thing. But I was also somewhat surprised that I saw similar coverage over on CNN and MSNBC. CNN and Fox News, I noticed even when they went to commercial, they had in a little box the smokestack showing, waiting for the white smoke to come out to announce the Pope. And it didn't seem like it was that big a story, but that you had to show it during the commercials. But as for Francis I, I can say the things I've seen commentators on the cable news stations, at least outside of Fox News, saying that, he has some very conservative views, particularly about same-sex marriage. I think he was quoted when he was a cardinal as saying that same-sex marriage is the work of the devil, and that I think there was something about him saying that adoption of children by gay couples is discrimination against children. And while you expect, of course, the Pope is going to think that homosexuality is a sin, that's a little disheartening. On the other hand, he's made a lot of statements in favor of the poor. I think it sounds kind of like what I said about Hugo Chavez last week. And about how the rich take advantage of the poor, and against the international banking establishment or whatever. So he has some good pro-poverty statements, some bad anti-gay statements, but of course you could watch all that commentary from the Young Turks or on MSNBC. I don't know if I have anything novel to add, although I noticed my daughter was upset that he chose the name Francis the First because I guess Francis is someone she dislikes in Super Paper Mario. So Francis the First is like a Super Paper Mario name. I don't know. Anyway, so I bet you didn't hear that on MSNBC. Let me go back over here. What was the Twitter question I got during the week? Oh, this just came up recently. March 9th from Hiro Nani asked, LiberalViewer, what are your religious views? Question for Wednesday Live. I think I talked about this in a previous video or somewhere. I consider myself agnostic, is how I would term my views. I know a lot of people call themselves atheists, and that the whole online community actually has the four categories. There's like agnostic atheist, Gnostic atheist, agnostic theist, and Gnostic theist. And but I think people who aren't really into the issue, what's called an agnostic atheist is what people generally call an agnostic. And I consider myself sort of on the more open-minded side of the atheist community, I guess. I don't know if that's sort of if people see that as an insult to people who call themselves straight atheists, but I mean, I believe in science and the scientific method and evidence-based logic deductions, and that's how you decide what the facts are. But I also have some belief that science doesn't explain everything that's going on in the universe, and I'm not sure. I guess I'm agnostic on the question as to whether science can explain. I don't know if there's some things that are beyond our perceptions or are beyond our ability ever to perceive. I don't know. But anyway, it's not that I mean, I am a skeptic. I don't really believe in things for which there's no evidence. I did grow up in a religious tradition, a progressive religious tradition. I was even like a religious school teacher back when I was in college. But even then, I was an agnostic. So I guess that answers that question. So let me look at some of the live questions here. Oh, 28 new comments. I guess we're really getting some. Let's see. The Swayze Express 1 asks, can you tell us about your time with the ACLU? Okay. I love talking about the ACLU. The ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union, America's premier civil liberties organization, also the largest nonprofit law firm in the United States. I first joined the ACLU when I was a senior in high school. I remember like the week I had to register for the draft. I registered for the vote when I turned 18, and I joined the ACLU. And I was just a member for quite a long time. And then after right when my last year of law school, I started getting involved in the ACLU online. They had a message board. It was like a chat forum and a message board that you could post on, and I volunteered to help sort of moderate those for a while when I was finishing up law school and after I graduated. And then when I was a public defender and I was involved in that online ACLU online message board, I got to know the person who became the executive director of my local ACLU affiliate. That was in St. Louis. That's the ACLU of Eastern Missouri. And since I became friends with the executive director there, I got involved in some cases. Even though I was working full time as a public defender, which, for those who don't know, that a public defender is someone who defends people accused of crimes who can't afford a lawyer, since you have a Sixth Amendment right to a lawyer under the U.S. Constitution. So public defenders fulfill that constitutional role when people can't afford a lawyer when they're charged with crimes. So when I was a lawyer in St. Louis, I was also active with the ACLU of Eastern Missouri. I worked on some issues. One of the big things I'm proud of that I accomplished there was that I found out that my clients who had mental illnesses, had mental illness diagnoses in the prison system, were ineligible for drug treatment programs. And that's really awful, because people who have drug problems, who have mental illnesses, are more likely to have drug problems because they self-medicate for their symptoms. And to not allow people with mental illnesses into drug treatment is also a violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act, because mental illness is a disability, and that's a government program that not letting people into it and not giving them the benefit of that is a discrimination based on the disability. So I worked with the ACLU on that, and they wrote up this letter to the Missouri Department of Corrections, and it wasn't really going anywhere until the Supreme Court decided this case about on a very similar issue about some guy who couldn't get into boot camp because I think it was heart medication. He was taking some kind of medication, and so he couldn't get into a prison boot camp program. And the Supreme Court said that was a violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and pretty much on point for this issue. And so the Missouri Department of Corrections changed its policy and said that people with mental illnesses taking psychotropic medications for their mental illnesses could qualify for drug treatment programs. Anyway, and I did several other things for the ACLU of Eastern Missouri, and when I quit being a public defender and started being a stay-at-home dad in the year 2000, I had some extra time, because that was when my daughter was born. And I even did this brief to the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals on this issue out of St. Louis where the KKK wanted to advertise on a NPR station, the local NPR station, which is a government radio station, and they were denied because they were, a racist organization, and NPR, or the public radio station, didn't want to be associated with the KKK. But of course, since it's a government organization, they're discriminating against the KKK on the basis of viewpoint, so the ACLU filed an amicus brief in favor of the KKK's position that they had a right to advertise like any other group. And so I wrote that amicus brief to the federal court, and the federal court did not agree with the position I advocated, though there was a footnote referring to my amicus brief saying that it was a refined argument. I was kind of proud of that. But So I did that stuff for the ACLU of Eastern Missouri when I was a stay-at-home dad, and I moved to California, and then I started getting involved. I formed the Sacramento chapter of the ACLU here in Sacramento, and that they elected me the chapter representative to the ACLU of Northern California in San Francisco, which is the largest affiliate of the ACLU. Has about 50,000 members and covers the whole Northern California area. And then I've been like vice chair of the board because I'm chair of the Field Activist Committee, which is the committee of all the people who represent chapters in the ACLU. So, and that's been for like 5 or 6 years. I think luckily there are term limits for chapter representatives for my chapter. So at the end of this year, I'll be done with that, and I'll be able to take a little rest from all that volunteer work for the ACLU, or at least at that level. So that is my story of my involvement with the ACLU. So let us see. Oh, a bunch more new comments. Benta Hest asks, do the viewers of Fox News really don't notice the bias? If so, seriously, why not? Well, I think there are people who want watch news and especially listen to radio, because this is really true of talk radio, as an echo chamber. They want to hear their views uh, parroted back to them. They want to hear people who say the things they already agree with. They're not really looking for information or education. They're looking for confirmation. And I think for a lot of Fox News viewers, that's what they're looking for, and that's what they get. So I think some of them justified. I mean, I get comments almost every day from people saying, Fox News may be biased, but everybody else is worse than Fox News, and this is just evening the scales. And I even see some people say that that's what fair and balanced means, that they're balancing out the left-wing media with this one conservative station. But of course, I think that Fox News, even if there may be occasional liberal bias or on the other stations, and I think the bias is more towards sensationalism and being simplistic, and of course corporate bias. Look, the corporate point of view gets a lot of bias on all of the media, including Fox News. But I think Fox News is the only one with that constant partisan bias, where they're pretty much always, except maybe on that Shepard Smith show, they're following the agenda of the Republican Party, and even just like the establishment Republican Party. Although, I don't know, I'm kind of curious to see which way Fox News is going to go on the split in the Republican Party, but I think it's going towards the establishment. But Sven Nor said, is this only going to discuss the new Pope? I did talk to him about the Pope a little bit. Let's see, what else do I have here? Hank Vanderlock asks, how do you feel about Americans getting angry when drones strike home, but not when they strike innocent foreigners? Well, I think that that's actually kind of a travesty, and I tried to avoid that in my in my videos addressing the issue. I mean, I did talk about the issue of whether drones can kill Americans on American soil, but that's not the only issue I discussed. And I think the use of drones to kill people who aren't Americans and aren't on American soil, or just the use of American force outside the regular battlefield when the rules don't fit what's been traditionally been the limit on American use of force, it is really troubling. And, I think that America's gone into this whole new phase of military action that's kind of unprecedented since September 11th. And it is disturbing the way we can go into countries. I mean, there's the whole Yemen thing, which is sort of a battlefield, and we have sort of the agreement of the host country to go in there. And then there's Somalia, where there's no government, and the whole Mali thing, but who knows where the United States is going to strike next, and what is the congressional oversight when it's supposed to be Congress that declares war. I mean, I don't have any problem with American use of force when it's to get somebody who's actually planning an imminent attack on the United States. I mean, that is self-defense, and I talked last Wednesday about how that's really what I think should be the limit on the government killing anyone, the same self-defense rules that apply to an individual. And whether it's an American citizen or anybody, even in a declared war, that's why soldiers don't kill soldiers from the opposing force when they're surrendering, or they're not supposed to anyway, because then the person's not a combatant when they're surrendering. And if someone's not a combatant, if they're not engaged in warfare and they're not an imminent threat, then the United States shouldn't be killing them. And I am disturbed that Rand Paul and the people on the right have really focused on the American citizen on American soil issue, because that's not the only limit on the use of force, and it's not like Americans are worth more than anybody else. So let me check my new comments here. Let's see. Deacon Regio 93 said, so that is your real voice. Well, I don't know. I don't really change my voice in my videos in any way other than I try to even out the volume between my voice and the clips. So I recently got a new microphone, but I've been using it on the last few videos. I think I've got the same voice I always do. Sometimes people ask me if I do something to my voice with, like, modulate it somehow with technology, but no. I just sometimes I even out the volume between my voice and the clips, but that's it. Let's see. What else do we have here? Kotsu asks, "Liberal viewer, do you think the libertarians will cleave from the moral majority? Could the Republican Party survive if that alliance fails?" Well, I've been waiting for this for a long time, actually. Like back around the time before the 2010 elections, I made a video called "Republican Party Imploding," where I talked about maybe the extremists in the Tea Party were going to split the Republican Party so that they couldn't win elections. And after the Mitt Romney's loss, I made a video called "Right Wing Crazies Lost Romney the Election," and I think there's some truth to that, the right wing positions that Romney had to take in the primary gave him problems in the election. But as for the libertarian wing and I made a couple of videos recently about the economic conservatives and the social conservatives, and how maybe one of my recent videos about the marijuana issue, that the economic conservatives could steal that issue from the Democrats and favor marijuana legalization, but the social conservatives would never let them. I think that there should be a split in the Republican Party, and some people are saying that President Obama is trying to exploit the split, especially with this whole budget deal, so that he breaks the Republican Party up. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that there's sort of a pendulum, and parties go back and forth, and sometimes they're up, sometimes they're down. I can even remember back to when the Democrats were down after the loss of McGovern, although I was, I wasn't even a teenager yet then. But and I can remember before Clinton won, there were people saying Democrats would never win another election. That Jimmy Carter's win was a fluke because of Watergate, and that Republicans had a lock on the White House, and that hasn't turned out to be true. I think when people say that that any party is dead, that it's not gonna, it's wishful thinking on the part of the opponents. So let me see here. I'm looking at the new comments here. See if there's one I can answer. A300 Pilotster says the ACLU is seemed to be demonized a lot for ignorant reasons, in my opinion. Is there an active PR program to help change this perception? Of course, the ACLU has communications professionals who are always trying to put forth the ACLU position, but I do think the ACLU gets a bad rap. I think, I mentioned earlier that I worked on that message board, and people would, the ACLU message board, and people would come on all the time to attack the ACLU and malign it. And I think the two biggest attacks I got were that the ACLU is anti-Christian or anti-religion, or that the ACLU is, I also got a lot of libertarians coming and arguing about the Second Amendment, which I think I talked about before. But on the ACLU anti-religion, I mean, I think the ACLU fights just as hard to support people who want to exercise their religion as it fights to stop the government from endorsing any particular religion. Um, and I would get people on this message board asking me all the time, when has the ACLU ever defended a Christian? And I started collecting examples of times when the ACLU actually defended Christians. And eventually I put it up on a website. I bought the URL aclufightsforchristians.com. And I have like dozens, I can't remember, it's like over 30 examples of cases where the ACLU has defended Christians' free exercise and free speech rights. And I like watching, I use my web tools or whatever to see who's been linking to that website every now and then. And I love doing that because I find all these like forums on all these, bizarre hobby topics, like, people who like racing cars or whatever. And somehow they get into these arguments and people see the ACLU is anti-Christian and they link to my website and they win the argument. So I love watching people use my website to win arguments all over the internet. So let's see. I got one more posted question earlier. Let me see. I will add that. Let's see if I can get it here. Is this the one? Oh yeah, this came earlier today from Charlemagne Coal. Out of all countries on earth, which do you believe is best by whatever measure you use to determine the greatness of a country? Human Development Index, democracy, equality, etc. I should go back to the camera. I'm not sure about this question. There's this whole American exceptionalism thing where especially conservatives believe that America is the greatest country on earth, and I don't know. I think that some people in other countries may also have their own form of exceptionalism where there's national pride, and that, it goes on to jingoism, which I don't believe in. I was educated in the United States, so of course that's a really pro-American education I got where, it's America is cast as sort of the end product of the Enlightenment, and as progress was made in, first you learn about going from feudalism to, the monarchy and the constitutional monarchy and the birth of democracy, and then all came over to the United States and came to fruition is the way they teach it in the United States. And I guess I have a little residue of that in my mind, maybe. And I do have a lot of respect and admiration for some of the principles the United States is founded on. I do believe in, I think I mentioned this before, the Enlightenment principles of life, liberty, and property as natural rights. I do believe in that, and that is sort of the basis of the U.S. Constitution. But there are a lot of other countries that have freedoms and respect civil liberties. I haven't traveled that much. Several years back, like back in 2005, I visited the Netherlands, and I really spent most of my time there in Amsterdam. And that seemed like a great city, and there was culture there, and the people were really friendly. The Nederlanders, I enjoyed my stay there, and there were certainly freedoms there, at least at that time, that people don't enjoy in the United States, or they seem to have a better attitude about, drug use and that kind of thing. Although that's loosened up some in the United States since 2005. Here in California, they have the medical marijuana thing that lets people, with the recommendation of a doctor, have free access to marijuana, basically. And of course, Colorado and Washington recently legalized. So some of that is getting better in the United States. But I don't think that I have enough knowledge to judge the United States against, all those different, the Human Development Index or the amount of freedom or those indices. But I like the United States. I like living here, but I'm not. I don't think I have the hubris to say it's the greatest country on earth. Although I believe certainly in those Enlightenment principles that it's supposed to be based on. Um, okay, so I finished that up. Let's see. I got some more comments here. Um, Richard Dolly asks, "Do you think a parliamentary system would work better for USA?" Um, well, and this, I guess, kind of is an extension of the question I asked before about because the American system is different from most countries, most liberal democracies have a parliamentary system, and I mean, I think there are definitely advantages to the American system and the two-party system. I get a lot of complaints about the two-party system and how the two parties are the same, and they do. I mean, there is some consensus, but I mean, in some ways, that's both the strength and the weakness of the American system is that it promotes centrism. Uh, Both parties have to go towards the center, except for maybe the congressional candidates in like the gerrymandered districts, but certainly for national elections, the presidential candidates and the general positions of the party have to go towards the center. And unlike the parliamentary system where splinter parties can get, enough votes to get one or two people into the parliament, everybody in the United States is going to be in the two parties. There's almost no political oxygen for smaller parties, and so that also uh, tends to make the United States a much more centrist country, and that could be why even in the Great Depression when we had the Socialist Party getting 10 or 20% of the vote, that was the peak because we people the extremes to the left and the extremes to the right just don't work in the United States. At least, I guess some people say that Bush and Obama are creeping fascism, and there's definitely a buildup in government power, but it has to be through this whole centrist consensus system and not what happened in Europe, with both fascism and totalitarian communism. Uh, the United States is much more immune to that because of our non-parliamentary system and the two-party system that leads us to centrism. I think I'm getting pretty close to my 30 minutes, even though I started late. Maybe take one or two more questions here. Vern Etzel asks, another ACLU question. Has the ACLU grown or waned in influence over the past 30 years or so? Well, I mean, I think the ACLU has grown in influence. I think it probably peaked with the most liberal Supreme Court, and then as my dog's coming in the room, as the courts, especially starting with Reagan, when conservatives really started appointing more conservative justices to the Supreme Court and to the federal courts in general, that made it more difficult for the ACLU because it had mostly been a organization that worked through litigation, and when the courts got more and more conservative and stopped upholding the Bill of Rights as strongly, it made it more difficult for the ACLU, and so the ACLU modified itself to do more lobbying and more grassroots organizing to make up for the fact that the courts weren't as good an avenue for protecting civil liberties anymore. And I think the ACLU certainly gained a huge amount of membership during the Bush years, and that's dropped off a little over during the Obama years because Bush was such a visible threat, especially to people on the left, to civil liberties. And so people joined up and got scared. And then when Obama won, people thought, oh, it's not as big a threat. But of course, people who are really paying attention know that it doesn't matter whether it's a Democrat or a Republican in the office, in the presidency. You still need to fight for civil liberties, and you still need the ACLU. So Although its membership at least has dropped off a little since the peak of the Bush scare against civil liberties. I think the ACLU is almost as strong as it's ever been. Um, Let me see. Oh, 17 comments since I started talking there. Uh, let's see. Ben Tehest asks, and I think this will be the last question, do you think voters of the Republican Party recognize the hypocrisy of voting for greater personal liberty against the liberty of putting chemicals into their system, as well as aborting up? Um, well, I mean, I don't understand. I mean, there definitely is a hypocrisy in the Republican Party about personal liberty, and I've talked about that in some of my videos. And I've tried to impress this on some of the conservatives who I know, especially through Polypop, um, that if you believe in personal liberty, then you can't really support the war on drugs, and you even being pro-choice, even if you are personally pro-life, having the government make that decision just doesn't make any sense. Um, do they see the hypocrisy? Well, I think people have an almost infinite number of ways of avoiding seeing their own hypocrisy. Um, let me see. Let me check out the control room here. I think that despite the lousy start here, that this was a productive Liberal Viewer Wednesday. I'm going to be doing this every week at 4:30 p.m. You can post your questions to me for Liberal Viewer Wednesday next week on Facebook or Twitter at the addresses you can see here. Please tune in next week, Liberal Viewer Wednesday, 4:30 p.m. Pacific. Hopefully it will start right on time next time. It was great to see you all, and have a good rest of your week.